The Boxer is a story that follows a broken teenage boy named Yu who lived in a dark world filled with pain and violence. In his teenage years, he meets an infamous boxing coach named K, who has an odd obsession with wanting to mold him into the next boxing world champion. Theology plays an important role in the storytelling of The Boxer. In fact, from the get-go, there are many recurring Christian symbols in this comic, not even mentioning all the church scenes. The story is filled with crosses, and also includes various Bible verses, prayers, and existential questions such as, what is the meaning of life? Why do bad things happen to good people? Where do we go after we die? Why do we suffer? As you may know, the Bible is a collection of religious texts and scriptures that addresses a set of morals by unfolding the stories of humans, from their inception to their corruption, and ultimately to their salvation. Much like this religious text, I believe that The Boxer also follows a similar structure. As such, this is my interpretation of The Boxer through the lens of Christianity. While the story of Genesis is a well-known one, it is also an important one for the analysis of The Boxer. Although it's the story of creation and beginning, it is equally a story of corruption and sin. From all of God's mighty creations, let's focus on a particular entity, the angels. These beings were brought to the world as ministering spirits, with the goal of serving their Lord. Among these angels, one of them stood out. His name was Lucifer. Lucifer was proud, too proud, to the point where he was impressed by his own beauty, intelligence, and splendor. Soon, his arrogance led him to believe that he was the rightful ruler in the place of God himself. His rebellion, however, was short-lived, as he was swiftly defeated by Michael and his boys and was ultimately banished to hell. But that didn't stop him. In the underworld, as he endured a great amount of punishment, he devoted his eternity to corrupt humans, starting with Adam and Eve. Coach K's path strongly resembles that of the fallen angel. Initially, his perception of life was mostly guided by good values, morals, order, and righteousness. He devoted his life fighting the real fight, and served his country as a skilled soldier who stood out on the battlefield. He had a beautiful family to care for, and was by my standard, a good person. Until a series of unfortunate events ruined him. A young civilian boy he saved during a war ended up becoming an enemy mercenary that K ultimately had to neutralize. This was the start of events that made him question his previous unwavering morals. Soon after, he lost his family due to an accident where a truck with malfunctioning brakes hit his wife and child to save a larger group of people. While questioning what was right or wrong, his moral compass was shattered as he took matters into his own hands and murdered the truck driver. This murder was a sign of arrogance in deciding who lives and who dies. It is as if K himself was passing divine judgment. He then uses his words to mislead and manipulate his trainees, leading Yu into a path of supremacy, power, and ultimately, corruption. Just as sin originated in the free will of Lucifer, K's perverted compulsion to seek the path of pain and bloodshed through boxing was the birth of sin in The Boxer. As mentioned earlier, Adam and Eve's original sin was the predecessor of corruption. Following this event, the Bible describes humanity as sinful and corrupt by nature. The Boxer follows a very similar approach when it comes to its character development. The author mainly focuses on their negative traits, focusing in on their sinful nature and their need for salvation. The story demonstrates just how corrupt, unfair, and sad the world is, and just how easy it is to sin, whether it's through pride, lust, or greed. Corruption in The Boxer is manifested in several ways, from a fighter's arrogance, to dirty fighting, to murder. Sin is a heavily present theme throughout the story. Among all these examples, K is the most notorious one. He is described as the devil himself. Flawless victory through complete annihilation and destruction of the opponent in his pleasure. Proclaiming that the meaning of life is to seek superiority in order to become God and dominate the ring is the source of K's motivation to train boxers. From Bob Ross to Aaron Tide, he tried several times to manipulate and influence his champions with his twisted ideals.
Kill him.
However, the infamous coach failed as these legendary figures could no longer tolerate his ways and eventually came to the realization that there was much more to life than what K led them on to believe, until the fateful discovery of the main character. Yu is what we could call a blank canvas. Unlike a normal human being, he is empty, devoid of any emotions. He is alone, absolute isolation from society in both norms and culture. Almost like a beast, he can't be characterized by human traits. Yu is the perfect vessel for Kei's twisted desires. With the combination of the MC's innate ability for boxing and Kei's cunning and malicious intentions, this duo was an unstoppable force of nature. As Yu further strayed from the path of humanity, Kei was ever so close to achieving his goal of breathing life into the perfect human specimen in his eyes. However, despite all the money, fame, and glory, Yu was in desperate need of something more, something that could not be found from Kei's values. He needed to become more human, not less. He needed to escape the loneliness and emptiness he felt his entire life, someone to truly understand his pain, his suffering, his past, his future, his life, and his name. He needed salvation. Yu's final opponent, Jay, was a very well-respected boxer. His record by the end of the story was 39 wins and 27 losses, which is a clever hint to the number of scripts in the Old Testament and New Testament respectively. All things considered, however, his career was pretty average. But his skill was known to be very mysterious, as he was capable of overwhelming the strongest boxers and yet have matches of equal footing with complete rookies. His opponents would all describe him as special, and mention that the fights would make them feel something, that they could find salvation after the bouts. Salvation is arguably the leading theme in the BOXER. Where there is salvation, there is a savior. Much like Jesus, who sacrificed himself for the sins of humanity, freeing them from being enslaved by their own desires, Jay was a clear Christ-like figure in the BOXER. I don't know about you guys, but something tells me his name isn't really a random coincidence. An event that showed Jay as a Christ-like figure was during the match between Fabrizio Santorino and Yu. The Santorino brothers are very often described as sinners. They became successful by breaking the law and cheating. During Fabrizio's match against Yu, their mother was in critical condition in the hospital, and Yu was giving Fabrizio the worst fight of his life, ready to kill him after being emotionally manipulated by Kei. As the Santorino family was going through hell, their little sister was repenting for their sins and praying for a miracle to save them. In the end, their mother lived, and so did Fabrizio, after Jay stopped Yu's deadly punch directed towards him. I believe this event is very biblical. It shows that no matter how sinful one person is, there is always room for salvation. Another instance where Jay's character resembles Jesus, and potentially the most important one, was during Yu and Jay's fight. This final fight with Jay showed desperation and a primal form of anger. Yu wanted to understand why the world was filled with so much suffering. He wanted to know why life had to eventually expire. He was lost and was in desperate need to find out who he was. In this distorted state of mind, Yu dealt pain-inflicting strikes and the result was a complete one-sided bloodbath. However, despite being a human punching bag, Jay's only response was to turn the other cheek. Introspectively, Yu gave Jay all the pain and suffering he had accumulated since birth, the same agony that prevented him from being happy. Unlike anyone else, only Jay seemingly understood this suffering. As a result, he endured. He withstood all this physical pain, the same pain that nearly ended the life of the human tank Tide. And near the end of the match, Jay achieved something that nobody else was able to do up until this point. He literally and figuratively managed to touch Yu. This shows us that the only person that was able to bring out Yu's vulnerability was Jay. This vulnerability resembles one of a person praying to God, desperately asking for help. As a prayer would, this fight and Jay's final words being, "It's okay," brought comfort to Yu and allowed him to see the light. The artist portrays this scene very well by finally shedding some light on the audience's face, which very well likely reflected the readers, us. Jay unveiled humanity in the audience that was previously illustrated as an entertainment-hungry, heartless, and faceless crowd from the start of the comic. After this event, the blonde boxer was never seen again. Some say he died, some say he lived, and continued to travel the world like he used to. As for Yu, he became a completely changed man. For the first time in his life, he felt like he wasn't alone. And just like Apostle Paul from the New Testament, he preached Jay's good news. The stars are shining just for you. The BOXER is more than just a sports comic. Rather, it's a story about life, with boxing being the well-oiled vehicle that is used to communicate this message. The narrative depicts difficult topics such as poverty, loss, trauma, and addiction. This comic encourages understanding, love, and hard work while rebuking judgment, hate, and corruption. That being said, I'd like to emphasize that JH conveys a message deeper than what words can. I hope you guys enjoyed this comic as much as I did. If you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe.